Welcome to Pure Hustle Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 423. A themed episode.
423? That's crazy. Is it 423 or 422?
I'm pretty sure it's 422. 422.
It's been a while.
Like the old days, doesn't it?
It's been a while since you messed up an episode number, but that is all right because 422 episodes is still pretty incredible. And today, since we're talking about something so old like Pure Hustle Podcast, 422 episodes in, we're going to talk about something else that's pretty old at this point, and that's eBay. And we're going to be talking about the fact that eBay may still be the best around, right? That part of what makes eBay great is that long-standing history of eBay and all the things that it provides for us. Even though we definitely have a love-hate relationship with eBay, there are a lot of things that we wish that eBay would change. There are a lot of things that we think eBay could improve on. We are definitely concerned about eBay's trajectory and what's going to end up happening in the future with the company and if it's going to help or hurt us as resellers. However, there's a point that can be made that eBay is still the best around.
And the interesting thing about it is, like you said, right, we have this love-hate relationship with eBay. We've actually been on the eBay for Business podcast. Did you know that was discontinued? Somebody told me it was discontinued. I didn't even know.
We outlasted even the eBay's own podcast. That's crazy.
You know what? I'm gonna look that up right now because I want to make sure. But you know, the reason I bring this all up is because, you know, I think about eBay, right? And there's many times that, you know, we've had episodes and we're kind of like, hey, the way to go is to, you know, start with eBay and go somewhere else. But we always end up going like, hey, we should always come back to eBay, right? eBay is kind of like home, right? It's where reselling begins to take off. It's where reselling happens. And so I want to remind people that, yes, there are great platforms out there, right? There's Whatnot. You can use Whatnot. And there's, you know, Poshmark, and there's Depop. But overall, right, and we talked about this in the live, right, the fact that eBay has such a history, has such a kind of like inculcated itself in the culture, and you and I disagree with this a little bit, but I still watch movies and people are like, oh, did you grab that on eBay, or did you see that on eBay, right? And
yeah, but are you watching old movies? Is that coming from new movies? What's a new movie that said that?
A new movie that's okay. Now you're calling me on the spot, but
I'm just saying. But you're right. It does have that. It does have that like household name. It's a cultural staple, and it has a place in the culture, in the milieu, the mindset of the people. And you know, I think, you know, I've mentioned over several podcasts that the concern is, are they going to keep that, or is it going to just be this old antiquated thing as new generations come up? But yeah, they certainly definitely have that household name.
So the reason I bring this up then, this whole episode, that, you know, we've done episodes like this many times, but I think it's always a good refresher to remember that, you know, in the end, if you're trying to sell secondary goods, there is no better place than eBay. There might be times where, you know, there's certain promotion happening on a certain platform, and you know, you're like, hey, maybe I need a cross post here and things take off, or maybe there's something else happening over here. But ultimately, right, what should be the place, your bread and butter, if you're selling secondary goods, it should be on eBay. And part of that is tied into the fact that there's a long history with eBay, right? eBay has been around for a long time. It started as Yahoo Auctions, and now I think it was Yahoo Auctions, and now it's been built into this huge conglomerate, right? It's not a conglomerate, but it's global, right? It's in several countries. It's in France, it's in Germany, it's in, you know, Australia, it's, you know, throughout the world, right? And that's why our podcast, right? People listen to our podcast from throughout the world, is because you can sell on eBay throughout the world. And so I think about the history, and I think about all the opportunities that eBay brings, and that history speaks to a lot of people, right? People understand, hey, if I'm looking for something, I'm going to go to eBay. People go, hey, I need this tool, I'm going to go to eBay. I need this auto part, or I need this collectible, or I need something, they go to eBay, right? Now, Amazon's a little different, right? I would say people go to Amazon if they need something new. I think a lot of people do that. But when it comes to secondary goods, eBay is still the place. It has that history. It has kind of like that, I don't know how, I talked about culture already, but it's kind of like just part of, I don't know, who we are as e-commerce people, right? Everybody understands eBay. And along with that history, though, there's also an understanding that like when you sell on eBay, like a lot of people are gonna know what you're selling. I don't know. I'm really bothered. See that light right here that's on my face? You're watching the YouTube. I got sunlight coming into the studio. Sorry, I don't know what cares, but
you didn't close up the blinds, man. Come on.
No, I don't even know where it's coming from. It's like some angelic light glowing in my podcast room. All right, so eBay has history. eBay kind of, with that history, right? They've established foundation that they know what they're doing, right? They've made a lot of changes, right? But even still, through those changes, right? They've been in the business so long. I would say, why would you trust an up and coming platform? And I know that's going to be controversial for a lot of people because there's always people trying to compete with eBay, right? Sometimes you get resellers that, hey, I want to start my own platform. And those platforms, they do all right in the beginning, depending on, if it's guided by an influencer or somebody who has a lot of venture capital invested into it. It may hang around for a while. It might be okay. But overall, like despite all these companies coming and going, eBay still ends up doing just fine, right?
That's right.
Whatnot, I would say has been the biggest challenge in recent years, but even still, eBay is still doing pretty well.
Yeah, and the fact that they've been around for so long has allowed them to get a foothold globally, right? They have operations happening all over the world, and they have over the years kind of, I don't want to say perfected, but they've definitely made shipping globally easier. In the past, it used to be really tricky unless you were using the GSP, the Global Shipping Program, and even that was kind of incredible. I remember early on in the podcast, I did not want to ship globally. That wasn't on my radar at all. You convinced me to try and set that up and to try the GSP. And so I was using Global Shipping Program, and like we've mentioned multiple times, and a lot of people can probably attest to this, that certain things, specifically higher value items and rare items, I'm not going to say it's a good chance it's going to go globally, because if you look at statistically in your store, it might only still be 1% of the really high-end items that are going globally. But you do have a chance of them going globally. So you're reaching a much broader audience. There's not many platforms that you can easily list something on. For instance, if I'm selling something locally, that's the other end of the spectrum, I'm to such a small, narrow spot, right? Like, who's going to be willing to drive an hour, 2 hours? Well, it depends on how nice my item is. Somebody might be willing to drive a couple hours. But when I post something on eBay, I know I'm going to be able to reach all the corners of the United States easily. And there's a chance that I'm going to be able to reach Japan or the UK or some other country, Australia. So it's pretty awesome that you have that flexibility with eBay that you just don't have with a lot of other platforms. And some platforms are including more and more global shipping. The international stuff is available. But again, because eBay has been around so long, going back to that idea of the history of eBay, because they've been around for so long, they've been able to develop those procedures and the being able to get through customs and having offices set up in different places, even having sellers throughout the world and not just in the United States. Whereas a new up and coming company, they might be able to say, hey, we'll ship to somewhere else. But does somebody in the UK know of the platform yet? Or do people in Australia know of this platform yet? Whereas something like eBay is kind of, it's not just an American household name. It tends to be more of a global household name as well.
Yeah, and I think about it too, like just the numbers, right? If you go to numbers, right? As of 2024, eBay has about 147 million buyers. Right now, the number has gone down. Don't get me wrong. Like, it used to be a lot bigger, but it's still king, right? Poshmark has about 80 million and Mercari has about 20 million. And then you throw in Depop and you throw in all these other groups, right? It's not even close, right? And again, like you said, the simplicity of selling globally on eBay is so it's so easy to do. You just got to ship to a place domestically and you're good to go. But think about the fact that, the reason that eBay is able to reach so many people is because they have that international shipping. Poshmark, I think they attempted it and they weren't able to do it. Mercari has kept within the States. The only place I know that actually has done a little bit is Amazon. Like, Amazon does reach, like, you can sell stuff in Mexico, you can sell stuff in Europe and so on. But there's so many hoops to jump through. Where on eBay kind of takes care of all those hoops and makes it a lot easier to do what you need to do to sell. So this is why, another reason I think that eBay is still king. Now, This one we talked about on the live, and it was some interesting discussion. But the reason why I think eBay is still king is that eBay takes a long time to move. Okay, so bear with me a little bit here. Okay, so we've seen in this last year some crazy moves, right? We saw Mercari adding fees to buyers. We saw Poshmark adding fees to buyers, adding Poshmark protection. And within 2 weeks, Poshmark did a 180, and we're like, nope, we're not doing this anymore. We're going back to our old ad fee structure, right? We've seen, other platforms like Whatnot try to do things, and then they change right away. But eBay, even though like it's a pain for a lot of sellers going like, eBay said they're going to do this, but they haven't done this. To me, that's kind of a sign of, hey, there's some due diligence that's happening. There's some research that's happening. And yeah, maybe maybe it could be that they just haven't been willing to move forward on stuff. But I do think there's something to be said about not moving in haste, right? Of creating a place that people go to, right? That they know what they're going to get. Yes, eBay still looks like it's the 90s on its website at times, right? But at least people recognize, like it's like Craigslist, right? I go to Craigslist and I know what I'm getting on Craigslist, right? There's no mystery. There's not like, oh no, if I post, I got to do all these different things. There's no, all these new updates. It's kind of like Craigslist is Craigslist. It is what it is. And you choose to use it, you choose to not use it. OfferUp has been kind of the same. Like OfferUp is a little different now because they have that thing where you can pay to see things sooner. And they've done a couple other changes, but it's kind of the same, right? Even when it combined with Let Go. Do you remember Let Go from back in the day? Yep. Where you'd post an OfferUp and Let Go, and it's like, wait, this is the same company, and they merged, yep. Right? You know what you're getting, right? And I kind of feel like with eBay, the fact that eBay hasn't been too drastic or hasn't made changes and gone like, you know what? I don't know if we should do that anymore. I think that's kind of helped eBay continue being the standard. I don't know. Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah, it's kind of like the metaphor is, eBay is like a big giant ship in the ocean. And so moving it, steering it, making it like turn all the way around is a massive undertaking. Whereas these smaller companies are like much smaller boats, so they can easily maneuver. So there is definitely a benefit to being flexible, to being able to maneuver quickly as a business and make big changes. But at the same time, there's a ditch you can fall on that side as well, where you make changes too quickly. And as you mentioned, maybe the company didn't do its due diligence. Maybe it makes a mistake where there is that slow and steady, right? Of eBay is kind of just trotting along. It's on course. It maybe makes minor course corrections. And that might be why it's had a problem with adapting with some of the changes, new companies like Whatnot or other things coming out. But again, if you let other companies kind of work out the bugs, you slowly integrate things, and then you make those changes in a much better way, it can be beneficial. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? eBay changing slowly brings with it a lot of downfalls. It brings with us like, why haven't they implemented this? Why haven't they changed this? Why haven't? But at the same time, there are the benefits of somebody who hasn't been on eBay in 10 years can go on eBay and pretty much have the same buying experience that they had, if they're a buyer, which brings that customer confidence, knowing that it's kind of a tried and true. It's going to stay the same. It's going to be pretty similar to those experiences you've had in the past with minor changes and updates. So hopefully that ends up in the long term being a positive for us as sellers. But there does need to be course corrections at times. So hopefully eBay hasn't gotten so massive that they're unable to make changes and adapt, right? Because adaptability is important as well. So again, there are downsides, but we want to highlight one of the benefits of this, because if you only focus on the negative, hey, you're missing out on some of the positives that come along with it. One of the other things that makes eBay great is it's a site where you can really sell pretty much anything. If you're going onto a site like Etsy, or you're going onto a site like Poshmark, or you're going onto various websites that you can potentially sell on, there tends to be more of a focus. And I know that Poshmark isn't just women's clothing anymore. I know they have hard goods, and I know they have other things. But if you're like, hey, I need like a really old cap that goes, like I got this thing right here. It's like a duster, air duster for, right? Like some people have like old ones that they need like a cap replacement. The only place I would check, if it's not a new product that you can get on Amazon, I'm going to go to eBay, right? Like if you're looking for something old, you know to go to eBay. The fact that you can pretty much sell anything, and people know that. People know, hey, I need a collectible, I can go to eBay. I need a part for my car, I can go on eBay. I need, almost anything you could think of. I need some books from my school. Are there other sites that do those things? Yes, but they tend to be niched down into more of one field. And so customers are kind of bouncing around all these different sites to get their needs met. Whereas eBay, they can get pretty much any need met, right? Like you can almost get anything. Think about Amazon. Like, right, Amazon wanted to be the everything store, and it really is, but it's not the everything store of used, right? It's the everything store of anything you can almost think of new. But if you're looking for if I wanted to get some old baseball cards to add to my collection, I'm not going on Amazon. I'm going on eBay. So eBay still has that everything miscellaneous, not just the brand new and packaged stuff. Now, can you get new and packaged stuff on eBay? Absolutely. But I think the fact that eBay goes beyond that gives it that breadth, gives it some positives that can definitely help us as sellers, because that's a place that customers are going to go. And as a reseller, being able to sell pretty much anything opens up the door for, if you're willing to do some research and learn a niche. I mean, you've sold old vintage paint cans. That's kind of why I use that duster thing as an example. If you're willing to learn a little bit about a niche or figure out about a new hobby or a new, whatever it is you're interested in, you could pretty much be profitable in any category on eBay if you know what you're doing.
No, and to add to that, like the product research on eBay has become better year after year after year. Now, at first it was like Terapeak, right? And Terapeak was only available I remember at one time Terapeak was its own like separate app, right? And then eventually it became part of eBay, and then it was only like you can only get 1 year of research, and then it became you could get 3 years of research, and now it's like it's on the app, right? Where on Amazon, for example, like if you want to have any kind of research, like you have to go third party, right? You have to go Keepa, you have to use Seller Amp, you have to use something else, right? And it'll give you history, but it's not, I would say, not even as detailed as eBay. And so not only has eBay done a great job of kind of establishing itself as a place where you can sell anything, you can actually research if it's even worth selling it, right? Or on Amazon, yeah, do I love the ranking? And I've actually suggested to eBay, like there should be some kind of ranking system on eBay, which would be kind of tough to do. And I'm sure, I don't know how, how Amazon would ever share their algorithm, right, to do that. But with eBay, right, you can pick things up now, and you go to product research and you can search about how that thing has sold during different times of the year. You can search about what has been the history of an item, and it's free, right? It's part of selling on eBay. And it's actually made other, third parties that you would be able to use kind of obsolete, because now it's all in-house in eBay. And so, we talked about how eBay is slow to move and how eBay is, that's a good thing. Well, here's a side where that slow movement allowed them, right, to create something that was good, right, that was valuable, that was helpful. And so I very much, I'm in favor of, hey, if you're going to sell anything on eBay, there's plenty of data, and there's plenty of research that you can do that you can't get on Poshmark, you can't get on Bonanza. Bonanza, by the way, I haven't had a sale on Bonanza in, I don't know, a long time, okay? But you can't get that research on Mercari, you can't get that research on Depop, but you can get it on eBay. And so that's one of the reasons I think eBay is still king when it comes to selling secondary goods. Now, before I move on, though, there is one thing that is still king when it comes to resellers and accounting, and it is My Reseller Genie. So My Reseller Genie is something that came through from resellers for resellers, and it was at a time when everybody was used to GoDaddy bookkeeping, and they filled that gap. And ever since, I don't know, was that 2-3 years ago, they've only improved on that product. And so if you're worried about bookkeeping on eBay, I just recently had filed my taxes, and it was smooth. Why? Because I had My Reseller Genie. I very much trusted that, they had everything I needed, and they did. They had, all the eBay fees, all the shipping fees. I could track my inventory. So if you haven't checked out My Reseller Genie, go to the link below and use our code Pure Hustle. You'll get 15% off the first month. Again, that's Pure Hustle. You get 15% off the first month. Check out My Reseller Genie. Now, Another thing, and before we move on to our hustles of the week that I want to touch on here, the fact that I really like eBay because eBay gives you options, right? A lot of other platforms, because they're new, I think they don't have the infrastructure. They're not able to give you all these different things to do, right? And so eBay, hey, if you want to have a store, you can choose a store and you can run sales, right? If you want to promote listings, you can promote listings. If you want to, choose different options for shipping, you can do that. Where on other platforms, it's like, hey, you can only ship with this carrier. You can only ship on these weights for these items, right? Where on eBay, you can kind of pick and choose. Like, hey, am I willing to lose a little bit of my bottom line so I can promote an item and sell it faster, right? Or am I willing not to promote the item and, maybe it'll take a little bit longer, but since I'm a part-time seller, I have that option. Where on a lot of these platforms, you really don't, right? Poshmark, I think they have, I forget what it's called, where you can promote your closets, right? There may be a little bit promoted, but generally, like eBay has figured out how to give people those options, right? I especially like the fact that, I can promote my store if I want to, even though I have said in the past, like, I don't know about this, but you can promote your store, you can promote off-site. You can choose what items. It doesn't even have to be your whole store. Like if you feel that there's a certain item that you can sell really quick, like you have that option. You can even go to pay-per-click if you want, right? There's all these options, and it's very robust on eBay in comparison to other platforms. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm a big fan of ownership. I'm a big fan of being given options, right? And I'll be fair, it does come with a cost on eBay, but again, at least you have the ability to do that where, on some of the platforms you're listing and there's nothing more you can do, right? It's kind of like, I hope somebody finds my item, right? Where on eBay, it does give you those different options. All right. Are we ready to talk about some hustles of the week here?
That's right. I want to make sure I don't hit the wrong one because I've hit the wrong one in the past, and it.
It's okay.
Wasn't
somebody supposed to do an opera one, like hustle of the week in opera?
Oh yeah. Maybe this is our call out to all of our listeners. We've got some talent out there. If you want to add some creative talent to the podcast, we are definitely open. You can send us an email. You can phone it in, whatever you'd like to do. But on top of that, we're about to talk about hustles of the week. So before I play the soundboard clip, if you have not submitted a hustle of the week recently or at all, please do so. You can do so on our Discord. You can do so by emailing us. You can send us on any social media platform. We really love getting the phone calls. What's our phone number, Orlando?
619-738-1170.
That's right. So give us a phone call, and we'd love to highlight you on our hustles of the week. Come on, hustlers. It's the freaking hustle of the week. Yeah. All right. So our first hustle of the week comes from Myriad Thrift. So Myriad Thrift from our Discord. So I was at an estate sale next door to my house, and since it was the last day, everything was 50% off. There were a bunch of tools in the basement, and I was loading up a box with things I needed for my own tool collection as well as for resale. I had no clue what this was, but Spider Sense went off and I threw in a box without looking it up. I paid $25 total for an overflowing box. Once I got home, I checked it out and saw them selling between $200 and $500 on eBay refurbished. I listed it for $300 untested just to see what happened. Since I have no idea how to check it out, it was a Murray Cruise Hines 200 amp 2-pole MD circuit breaker. And so the next,
what that is either.
So this is a circuit breaker. The next morning, I had an offer for $156 from the seller who refurbishes them. Paid less than a nickel for it, so I took it immediately, knowing there shouldn't be a return if he's going to refurbish it. Great fast ROI for me, and great ROI for him too if he's able to get $500 for it later on. Don't sleep on electrical stuff, especially if it's really heavy. Yeah, that's great. I've talked about in the past, the outdoor, breaker boxes like that, or things that can contain electrical units or electrical components. Those things can be very, very valuable, especially because if you're getting them new, any kind of outdoor electrical stuff can be pretty expensive. If you're going to Home Depot and you're buying those things, so people are more than willing to buy them off of eBay. So yeah, definitely don't sleep on those types of items.
No, and again, it's one of those things where I always tell people, like, be willing to sell things to another reseller, knowing that you're gonna make money, right? That they're gonna make money. Be happy with it, because sometimes people are like, oh, I should be able to get as much as that person. Sometimes it's just better to just move, like move that inventory, you know. All right, this one comes from our Gmail. So if you haven't, emailed us yet, you can always email us at pureosapodcast@gmail.com. That's pureosapodcast@gmail.com. This comes from Nick. Nick said, a couple weekends ago, I was on the road. There weren't a lot of sales open on that Friday, most Saturday only, but decided to check out a community sale anyways, just in case. First sale I went to, I asked for video games. They said they had Star Wars figures, so I took a look. There were 15 sealed 79 through 1983 Star Wars figures, over 74 loose figures, and another 20 in sealed bags, along with unopened Star Wars vehicles. I paid $1,400 for the entire lot. Estimated value was $1,700. Just went full time because I lost my job, so this was a huge start for this new section of my life. Thank you guys for all your hard work. You keep me motivated. Thanks for being real. Nice. And the reason I wanted to bring this up, usually we're always waiting for things to end up, sold, right? We don't always talk about when people pick things up. But for this one, I thought it would be very good to talk about because, Nick had just said he lost his job. So I'm hoping you find a job soon. But you're going full time, right? And this is one of those things that when you first go full time, you might be a little bit hesitant, right? You might I don't know if I want to pull the trigger. I don't know if I want to make this big buy. But part of being a full-time reseller is making those big buys. Now, obviously, you have to do your due diligence. Obviously, you have to check comp, sell through, all that stuff. But part of, to me, is like the validation that you need as a full-time seller is to make that big buy, right? Because when you make that big buy, what you're selling is, hey, I'm burning all my ships. There's no turning back. Like, I'm all in, right? And so when Nick did this, it's good for him. I mean, what a great score, right? Star Wars always sells well, especially sealed vintage Star Wars, right? I think about my own story when I went to that Toys R Us and I dropped $5,000 on a whole bunch of Playmobil, right? And I remember that was the same day somebody had reached out to me and they wanted me to be a principal at a school at that time, and I went along with it. I really wasn't like 100%. I kind of was like, I want to be full time. But I entertained it, right? And I did the whole thing. I got a suit, and I went to interview and all that. And I remember being at the Toys R Us counter, answering the phone while I'm, processing, I don't know how many items, but it took like 40 minutes for them to scan everything. And I'm on the phone, and I didn't get the position at that school. But at the same time, I was like, wait a second. I just made a $5,000 purchase. Maybe I'm not supposed to be doing that. And sure enough, I saw that as like a sign, right? This is validation, like this is what I need to do. And sure enough, that's what started my reselling full-time journey. Like that was, I think within a month of us starting the podcast, or even weeks of the podcast, within weeks of me going full-time. And so, Nick, I hope that this experience goes well for you. I hope it all sells. Keep us posted. But that's one of the things we always talk about. Like, hey, when you go full-time, you got to make sure you buy enough to stay full-time. So, all right, there's my little story there with that one.
I love it. All right, our next one comes from one of our favorite people, and that is Tim the Slim, who is on our Discord and has been a longtime listener and supporter of our podcast. So he starts off by letting us know having a truck is a hack in the reselling business, and that is absolutely true. I don't own a truck. I used to have a 4Runner. Well, I still do. I haven't sold it yet.
You still got it, right? Okay.
But it's not quite a truck, but it fits a lot in there. But people want stuff gone, right? That's what he says. People want stuff gone. So anyways, he picked up a wicker lawn set of chairs and a table. He paid $60 and it sold the next day for $175 local. Would usually go for $250 plus, but the cushions were fairly stained. Yeah, I mean, you can, if you're willing to pick up big stuff. I mean, Orlando, when we go to garage sales, or when I used to go out to garage sales in San Diego, we'd go out to garage sales in San Diego. What would you see a lot of times trucks full of?
Oh, furniture. And it's insane. Not only is it just like the bed, it's like stacked up high, right? Like these huge cages are built. And we have a lot of our Mexican neighbors that come on over, and they just stack it full, right? And how many times do we miss out? And they get it for like dirt cheap, right? Because people just want to move that stuff. You know what I'm saying? So if you have that truck, it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's another reason why I've said, I mean, a truck is obviously the ideal. I've had trailers. I think trailers can be useful too if you know you're going to go pick stuff up. But if your daily driver is a truck, you're driving down the road, you see something on the side of the road, someone's got something for sale listed. A lot of times it's a big furniture item. So that's definitely one of the best ways to go if you can.
So I got to tell you, but picking up that wicker lawn set, like wicker, by the way, that's a bolo, right?
Yeah.
A wicker lawn set, $60 and turn it into 175, like quick, right? That's the beauty of local. And for some reason, Tim the Slim gets these local things. Like, I have a terrible time with local deals. Maybe because in San Diego there's so much competition, but I always find ideal, like, out of all the sales I've tried to do local, like maybe I've been able to convert like 10 to 20% of them. It's always flakes. But here's the thing. Wicker, like, for whatever reason, there's still a strong market for it. Even if it's like laundry baskets, it has to be like vintage. Like, I remember that frog one. Do you remember that frog one I had that I picked up for $5 and I sold for like $200? So, no, nice pickup, Tim the Slim. And by the way, stay tuned. I think we may be having him in here for an interview. We haven't had an interview in a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It was a K-Way? K-Way was our last
K-Way.
one, and that was, I don't even know when that was. That might have been a year ago.
Yep.
It might have been a long time ago. Or maybe earlier in the year. I don't remember. But anyways, Tim the Slim, always appreciate you. Always a mention on the Discord. And so, Mike, you had shared with me Hustle of the Week, not for this week, right?
Yeah, I did sell, it's reselling related because it was one of my own collections, but I sold a board game collection that I had, one specific game, and I did it as a auction and not as a buy it now, and I did it as a week auction, and I really was hoping to get 300 for it. I set my initial auction at 250. And then I did a buy it now at 375 because I was like, I think I'm going to get around 300, maybe a little more. I was hoping to push it up above 300. I mentioned that in our last update episode. Unfortunately, though, I had 14 watchers on it, right? So I'm like, man, this is definitely going to sell for quite a lot. Had 14 watchers on it, and somebody put in a bid a little earlier in the day, and the day it was ending. And then when it came down to the actual ending, like with the seconds left, one more person bid $5 above. And whoever made the initial bid didn't do anything above that. And I didn't end up having a bidding war. I have a feeling the person who bought it for $255 had a much higher bid because I think it was probably closer to 300, but I was still happy to move it within a week because otherwise if I would have sat out on it and waited for 300, I could still be sitting on it for months and months to come. So overall, I'm happy with that sale. But not to say that my little experiment didn't work, but it didn't quite work out the way I was hoping it would. So,
hey, you know what? But you gotta try.
Gotta try.
All right. Hey, so my hustle of the week, I had mentioned this a few weeks ago when I was at a garage sale, and I came across this collection of Nightmare Before Christmas items. And I always say Nightmare Before Christmas, they're a good pickup. I mean, obviously, I think with Loot Crate, you got to be careful. Like, I have a lot of Loot Crate stuff that one of my good friends had given to me, and Loot Crate, like, it's kind of like Funko Pops or like Beanie Babies. Like, everybody gets that stuff, right? But if you can find like unique Nightmare Before Christmas stuff, like, you have good sellers. So just to recap the story, went to the garage sale. I had this awkward moment where there's all this Nightmare Before Christmas stuff, and I had this conversation with the lady that owned it, and I thought we were kind of familiar, like we were friends, right? So I can like throw out a crazy number and we're still gonna be friends. And so she had said, so what's your crazy number? And I said, you know what, $75 for everything. And it was probably like 40 pieces of Nightmare Before Christmas, like action figures and different collectibles. She's like, $75? Like, I was thinking more like $200. And I said, well, I don't know. I was like, I maybe I could do like 100 or so, but I don't know how long this stuff is gonna sit. And I was being real about it. Like, this market, sometimes you don't know. And so, we talked some more, and she found out I was, a teacher and an administrator, and I was moving eventually and all this stuff. And so when I take out the money to pay, she goes, you know what? Just give me $75. And I was like, what? Are you sure? And she's like, yeah, 75. And I was like, okay. I didn't even have to haggle that. And so I didn't have change, and I gave her 80, and I said, hey, thank you so much for this. I really appreciate that. And sure enough, one of the pieces, I already sold a few pieces. I've been in the profit already, but one of the pieces, it was this huge, like, It was made by the company June, Jun. It was a Nightmare Before Christmas Jack Skellington action figure deluxe set. And so it had all the characters from Nightmare Before Christmas. It had a huge Jack Skellington. It was new and sealed. The box had some wear. By the way, if you have something that's new old stock, it's okay to say new old stock and then say, hey, packaging is worn. Please see pictures. Never had an issue with that. And again, I paid $75. I'm already in the profit. And this piece sold for $150 plus ship. So I was very happy with that hustle of the week. So you just never know. I always tell people, have conversations. You never know what's going to come out of that conversation. Even in that conversation, you may work out a deal that you never saw coming. So make sure to always do that. Hey, before we move on, I want to say thank you to all of you that follow us on social media. We are Pure Hustle Podcast on all platforms, except we are Pure Hustle Cast on X. I want to say, hey, thank you to all of you that consistently listen to the podcast. I know there are many options out there, right? There's like Mike and I before the podcast were talking about. Remember when we were the only game on town outside of Scavenger Life, right? It was Scavenger Life and it was us, and we ended up amassing thousands of listeners pretty quick because we were the only game in town. Well, we still have thousands of listeners. And that's because people have chosen to stick with Pure Hustle Podcast. I want to bring this up because I read some comments on Discord and it kind of motivated me to keep going. Not that we were going to end the podcast anytime soon, but sometimes you kind of need that push going, hey, are we really making a change? Like, are we really helping people? Right? Because after a while, right, you get a lot of negativity the bigger you get, right? And you kind of dwell on that. And, a lot of the comments I saw on the Discord, people were talking about, hey, I've been listening for a couple months. I decided to finally jump on. And then somebody said, hey, this is the best Discord out there. Thanks for joining us. Somebody had said, hey, I've been listening to the podcast for a long time. I always appreciate that these guys keep it real. And there were like all these comments on there. And I was like, you know what? I'm so glad we continue on with the podcast, right? Is it 6 years now going into the podcast?
I think
400
so.
something episodes later. And we actually did outlast eBay for Business. I saw their last episode was September 24th. And so now we're approaching November. So yay, we beat out
That's
eBay
crazy.
for Business.
We did it.
But we did it. And I want to thank every single person that's tuned in. I want to thank everybody who's stuck with our Discord, because the reason our Discord is great, it's not because of Mike and I, it's because of everybody that's in there, right? We have such a breadth of experience and different platforms that people sell on, different knowledge bases. And so if you haven't checked out yet our Discord, I encourage you to jump on there. The way to do that is go to our Patreon, go patreon.com/Pure Hustle Podcast for $5.55 a month, right? Less than a chicken Big Mac. You can enjoy the Discord, and you can make enough money that you can enjoy a chicken Big Mac guilt-free because you made profit. Have you had the chicken Big Mac yet?
No, I don't typically eat that kind of fast food, but it sounds pretty good.
It is. It's kind of weird. Like, you'd think like this is kind of weird, but I actually enjoyed it. So,
I love chicken sandwiches, so I might have to give it a shot.
There you go. But for less than the cost of a chicken Big Mac a month, you can enjoy the Discord. So jump on over to Patreon, sign up. We'd love to see you in the Discord. Love to have a great conversation there. And there's a lot of experts that are in there too. We're probably like the most affordable Discord out there for reselling. Like, I don't know anybody that has this. And I always say we should change the price, but you know what? We're going to keep it here. Appreciate every single one of you. And as always, I just want to let you all know, I want to hit that 800 iTunes reviews, and it's been kind of stagnant. Haven't seen anything. Maybe it's our content. Maybe there's too much competition. People aren't thinking about us. But if you've been listening, please jump on over. Love to see, by the time we record our next theme episode, 800 reviews, all 5 stars, and let people know why you listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk a little bit more about why eBay is still king.
All right. So one of the next things that is kind of important about eBay is really buyer friendly. There's a lot of confidence that buyers go in on eBay because they know that they can return items for the most part. It's very clear to see if a seller is got a high rating or not. You can look at the reviews for the seller, because like a lot of times if you're buying something on Amazon, you're looking at the item reviews, which can be very helpful. But if you're buying used things, that's not always the most helpful, right? Or if you're buying maybe an off-brand of something, because how many times do you see on Amazon where Amazon reviews say the item is okay for this and this, but the seller is really bad or it's packaged? But that doesn't help me. If I'm going to buy on Amazon, I'm probably buying from a different seller than that person received their item from. So eBay is really buyer friendly. As a buyer, you have a lot of confidence, but with that also comes protections for the seller, right? So it kind of, eBay gives a little bit of both. The buyers have a lot of protection. They know that, if an item comes not as described, they're going to be able to get it taken care of. But as a seller, we also know that, of course, there are bad buyers and there are buyers who use and abuse the system. But for the most part, most buyers are pretty good. You can't let the handful of bad experiences you have taint your view on that. But if a customer buys an item from you and then they ship back the wrong thing or because it doesn't fit, you have a lot of protections where you can do partial returns or partial refunds. eBay is not as easy to work with to get things like negative feedback removed, but you can still work with eBay to potentially have issues resolved. So eBay is nice because it gives a little bit of both, right? Whereas if you're selling on a platform like Amazon, there's almost no seller protection at all. It's all just buyer protection. And other platforms, maybe you have a lot of seller protections, but there's not a lot of confidence as a buyer. Like, am I actually getting something that's useful and good? And what if it doesn't work? And do they accept returns? They don't. It's a hassle. So eBay kind of gives a little bit of both options, us as the sellers, also for the buyers, which I think blends into a nice mix that keeps eBay very relevant and continuing to, succeed. I don't know if I would say like grow, but they're continuing to stay afloat and they're continuing to be that household name because it provides protections for both seller and buyer.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the reason I like it too is the fact that you want a company that protects buyers, right? I know that's going to sound off. Like a lot of people are going to be like, oh, eBay, right? It's always scamming and blah, blah, blah. But the reality is you want eBay to prefer buyers, right? Because that means that they're going to bring more people to the to the platform, which is going to bring more money to your pockets, right? And if people can buy with confidence, right? So I thought about this the other day. I was really annoyed. I sold a pair of Nike Oregon Duck shoes, right? They're awesome shoes. I bought them from the Nike outlet. They were brand new. I sent them out and they went through authenticity guarantee and they got denied. And they said that my shoes smelled like smoke or something. Now, I do remember I did pick up some random box from U-Haul. And I remember there was like, oh, this box kind of smells weird, but I'm sure it'll go away. And I just shipped out in that box, right? That's probably what happened, right? I have to go pick it up from my P.O. box. But I appreciate that eBay did that, right? Because what if that got to the buyer and the shoes actually do smell like smoke and it just makes eBay look bad. It makes me look bad, right? And so eBay protected the buyer, but they also protected me at that time, right? Because that could have led to negative feedback, right? And so as much as I was annoyed by that, it's very possible that I dropped the ball on something, right? And then on the other side of it, with international sales, right? There are people that are buying from a complete stranger in another country, right? That you need a lot of trust to do that, right? Especially when it's a collectible. And then I myself, as a seller, need to have a lot of trust that I'm shipping out something that's very valuable and knowing that I'm not going to get it stolen from me. And eBay right now is a great plan where if somebody buys something from you internationally and they want to return it, eBay will cover the cost. Even to this day, they've been doing this for over a year. And I've had 2 or 3 in the last month. And I'm like, man, for the person to return it, it would cost more than the item that I sold. But guess what? eBay took care of it. So I think it's on both sides. I think we need to forget that eBay is a business. And yes, we are the customers for eBay. But at the same time, I would say the customer that matters more, as much as people don't want to hear this, are the buyers. Because they're what keep the platform thriving. Now, another one that people aren't going to like hearing is eBay rewards hard work. Right? And I would say, it's become harder, right? You have to list more. You have to respond more. You have to provide more customer service. But the reality is, those people that are killing on eBay, it's not because, they have necessarily a special skill. It's not because, they've been favored or they're part of a family of resellers. No, it's because they put in that work, right? The easiest one to point to is Tech and Sports, but there's a lot of people just like him out there now that are like listing 50, 100, 200 items a day, and they're just killing it, right? And they're getting those sales, right? And this is hard for me to say because I used to enjoy the 20-hour weeks and I'd make just as much money as I make now. But the reality is, if you're constantly listing, number one, though, you do have to find good items, right? Keep your costs low. But if you're doing those things, you're constantly listing and you're constantly shipping, and you become a top rated seller, right? You have 100% feedback, or you have 90+% feedback, right? eBay will reward that hard work. People will put your item, eBay will put your item higher in the search. When it comes to feedback, and I just experienced this recently, where eBay is changing their feedback policy, where it's not as stringent as it used to be. When I call them, they're like, "Hey, thanks so much for being with eBay for, I think it's 13 years now, whatever it is," and that does play a part, right? In the fact that, hey, if some crazy buyer, right, makes up things or whatever, the fact that I've had this long history with eBay, the fact that I'm constantly producing sales, eBay is willing to work with me, and they're willing to turn over a negative feedback if it's based on lies. Where if you're a brand new seller and you're just listing when you can, and you're not caring very much, and your feedback's terrible. Like, when you make that phone call, eBay is not going to be very helpful to you. But if you're being consistent, eBay will reward that hard work.
Oh, that's good. Another thing that makes eBay really good is they're really good at engaging with the reselling community. So, I'm not as big of selling on other platforms. I mean, I do a lot of local. I do Facebook Marketplace. I do Craigslist. I do all of those. I've done some Mercari. I've done some Poshmark. We did go to a Poshmark seller event. So there are other companies that, just to you.
No, it was weird. It was like fashion show, and like it just where eBay, you don't feel like that, right? You go to eBay, like I can show up in sweats and everybody's accepting of me. But when I went to Poshmark, like, it wasn't like that. It was like I should have worn a tux or something.
Because it was a nice event. I mean, it wasn't quite a gala, but it was a nice event. But anyways, but eBay does, as much as we would love for them to bring back the eBay opens where it's live, as much as we've complained about them not having those in the last several years, they do still offer opportunities to meet with people at eBay. They do still offer many opportunities to interact, whether it's on their website, whether it's through, eBay opens that they're doing or other eBay outreaches that they do. They are active on the forums and on the Facebook. And so there are ways of getting in contact with eBay, learning what's happening with eBay, and potentially being able to talk to people who can make some changes, right? So when you have a complaint or an issue or concerns or ideas, you can actually bring that to them, and you're going to be able to talk to real people. Whereas, for instance, something like Amazon, the experience of just the average everyday person, especially resellers like us, we're not at all on their radar. Like, the kind of resellers that we are is already small enough on eBay. Their big bread and butter comes from these big sellers that obviously have probably even more connection with them. But the kind of small fries like us, if you're doing 6 figures or under, and you're not doing, like 7, 8 figures, 9 figures on eBay, they still care, right? They're still willing to reach out to you and have opportunities to connect face to face or connect via the internet. And that's pretty unique that they keep that going. They could easily say, we're doing our own thing, but I think they recognize that there are a lot of upset resellers on things. There are a lot of people who are not happy with the way certain things go. And so they try and offer opportunities to actually meet with and talk to people and share what's happening with the company, which I think is at least a positive, right? It would be worse if we had all these complaints and there was no outlet, right? Imagine if this was us on Amazon, if eBay ran like Amazon did, what could you do? You would just have to grin and bear it.
Yeah. No, and again, I'm going to go back to the Poshmark event and the eBay event that we had. Like, eBay welcomes all kinds of different resellers, right? It's like when I can't wait for I think they're doing a 30th anniversary eBay open, like, live, right? And I'm hoping that it works with the schedule of Mike and I to be able to attend. But when you go, right, you can meet all kinds of people from all different walks of life, and it's super welcoming, right? It was just I just remember the event after hours. I remember just hanging out with people, and it was just a good time. And eBay does not have to do that, right? eBay actually, I think, could get, don't just cover your ears, eBay could get rid of all that, and we're still going to sell on eBay, right? It's not going to stop me from selling on eBay. To me, it's a plus, right? And not only that, but they want to help you succeed. And as much as I've said, hey, I've met some people and it wasn't very helpful, eBay ultimately, though, does want you to succeed because it brings in money for them and brings in money for you. All right. And then, I want to touch on this because I think this is one of the reasons eBay is very successful. There's actually twofold. I want to talk about how they protect their brand and the fact that they're a public company. Number one, eBay, right, they are continually trying to change with the way things are going, right? Because as technology has changed, it's a lot easier to have counterfeits, right? As technology has changed, right, it's a lot easier, right, to maybe 3D print something or maybe get yourself, items that aren't like the most legitimate, right? And I already touched on eBay Authentic Guarantee, but I want to touch on it some more a little bit. The fact that eBay is very much trying to separate itself from the crowd by saying, hey, you want to buy from a trusted source. You want to buy shoes from us. We have eBay Authenticity Guarantee for our sneakers, right? And the crazy thing is they even have for like $40, $50 shoes. It's wild. I don't even know why, but they do, right? When it comes to purses, when it comes to jewelry, when it comes to watches. And not only that, but now they have golden auctions, right? I don't know. Did you see the Shohei Ohtani? I said his name wrong. Shohei Ohtani baseball. Did you see how much it sold for?
What did it go for?
It's crazy. Okay, so just background of the story, right? It was a 50 for 50 baseball, right? 50 steals, 50 home runs, right? Breaking records. By the way, Dodgers are in the World Series. Maybe by now they've won the World Series. We'll see what happens. I'm not a Dodger fan, by the way, but I am a Ohtani fan. Okay, so the Dodgers offered him $300,000, right? He turns down the $300,000, goes to Golden Auction, which is part of eBay, right? Again, eBay, this is eBay branding. This is great for the company, right? Ken Golden gets a hold of the baseball, sells at auction, $4.4 million. $4.4 million. Now, here's the tricky thing about it. It's kind of like an escrow right now because there's two lawsuits. There's an 18-year-old kid that says he grabbed it first and it was taken from him. And there's another person that claims they actually had their hand on it too. So we don't know where it's going to go. But here's the thing, right? If this was some random site, right, and that was like, oh, we're going to hold this auction, like no one would pay attention, right? But eBay is known as being authentic, and Ken Golden and his company has done such a good job as placing themselves as the go-to company if you want to sell your collectibles, because all our stuff is legit, all our stuff is real. So eBay has done a very, very incredible job of protecting its brand, and now high-end collectibles, it's doing that. I would say they're at the level of Christie's, Sotheby's, like all these other companies that people think about, like high-end auctions. eBay is that thing now, right? Because of their acquisition of Golden Collectibles. So this is another reason why I'm very much a fan of eBay, in the sense being the king of everything when it comes to second-hand commerce. Now, this last one. I think it being a public company is very vital to its growth. At eBay, the CEO, Jamie Iannone, right, everybody else, they have somebody they have to answer to, right, or the board will remove them, right? And I think of the crazy moves. Like, I think about the move that Poshmark just did, and they're a private company now. They got bought out by Naver or some other company. They were public for a while, and then they went private when they got bought out by, I believe it was a Korean company. And this crazy shift that they did with, let's make the fees this way, and then 2 weeks they turn around and do it. That would not happen on eBay. Like, how do you explain that to shareholders? Hey, by the way, we got this idea, and we threw it out there, and it killed our business. We just want to let you know. Like, that would instantly, right, cause major, major turmoil within the company. But I do think the fact that eBay has shareholders that it has to continually produce profit to, right, that it has people to answer to, is going to keep eBay afloat. And yes, GMV, right, gross merchandise value, how much eBay has sold has not gone up substantially, but eBay has still been profitable because of promoted listings and all the other things that they're doing.
That is the one bad part about it being a public company is a lot of times public companies are because they have shareholders. I mean, think about any of the big companies that have really been groundbreaking, right? Like right now, you can think of Tesla, you can think of what Elon Musk is doing, you can think of what Steve Jobs did with Apple. You can think of, any of these kind of innovative companies. A lot of times what made the company what it was like the mind of the leader, right? Like one person that's kind of controlling the ship and really directing it. And when they leave, and even though you have a board, and even though you have replacement CEOs, and even though you have people who have, reason to make sure the company stays profitable, a lot of times the actual vision changes and the purpose, and because it's not just we are going to innovate and make, it becomes how can I make sure that the earnings report, the next time we do a quarterly earnings report, shows some growth, and so that way the stock goes up and people are happy. And so a lot of times public companies will make poor long-term decisions in order to make short-term gains, so that can be a negative too. And a lot of these things provide both negatives and positives, but you're right, there are positives to being a public company. One of those positives is the fact that we can see, like, they have to show us how things are going, where they're making their money, how they're making their money, how much money they made. And so there's less of like, what's going on? Like, why are they doing it this way? Are they taking too much from us? We kind of have more transparency. So that is nice. And then, like you said, there are the shareholders that are going to want to make sure. I mean, some of them at least are hoping to stay in eBay for a while and keep eBay going and not just jump ship to the next company or the next stock that's going to make them some money.
But I think about look at eBay. Like, they started at $40 January 2024, right, in their stock price, and now they're at $60+, right?
I mean, again, I don't always look at that as like, that's just, a lot of that is just speculation, right? Like, people are thinking, what is the company worth, which is an indicator, right? Like, what people are willing to pay for a share is an indicator, but it's not the only thing, right? Because again, a company can be profitable because it's making short-term profits on a decision, but not necessarily growing as a company. So, a lot of times companies can have the stock prices can go up while the company's sinking. Sometimes stocks drop. Companies end up, and those become value stocks because you can pick them up for underneath of what they're actually valued at. So it's still a bit of speculation. I mean, there is something to say it is a indicator, but I don't think it's the best indicator. It's almost like when we see people showing us their 90-day total, right? It's like, you can show me a higher 90-day total. Look, my 90-day total went up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you've actually improved as a reseller, or your take home is anymore. So yeah, I think the fact that their stock has gone up is good, but I don't think it's the end all be all.
But yeah, and I get that, and we can even say, like, what if it became a meme stock, right? It became like GameStop or something. But that's not what the reason I bring up that number is not because I think that's evidence of the fact that, hey, eBay is the biggest game in town. The reason I bring that up is because what it does when there's shareholders, there's accountability, right? There's a moving force. Right, there's an indirect force that says, hey, you must stay profitable, right, or people will not invest in your company, right? And Poshmark has not stayed profitable, right? Or if they have, it's been like very slim margins, right? Macari has struggled, right? Depop has struggled, like Grailed, all these companies, right? They're still around, right? But the fact that they have something holding them accountable, right? And so to me, that's a big deal, and that gives me trust in the fact that, hey, you know what? It's still going to be viable. It's still going to be up for the next, I would say for a long time, right? Because the reality is, at a certain point, like, private industry is great, but if you want to expand, you want to grow, you want to have accountability, I think there's a time to go public, right? And so, I just think about Whatnot. Like, Whatnot hasn't gone public yet, right? It's still it's still privately held. Right. But I think if it did go, right, if it ever went that direction, I think a lot of the shenanigans that goes on and Whatnot would stop. Right. Because they would have to answer to shareholders, where now they kind of, you can still have the gambling, and you could have, all the crazy stuff that goes on there, which eBay would not stand for, because it would also get itself into a lot of issues with its shareholders. So I don't know. I see where you're going with it, but I'm also like, hey, listen, in the end, accountability is a good thing, as long as it's kept, within private, and not, without the government regulating it, but instead letting the free market regulate it via the shareholders. So, all right, hey everyone, thanks for tuning into this episode. Hopefully, this is giving you some insight into, if you're wondering, like, oh man, should I remove all my stuff from eBay? Should I end up, I'm a new seller. Where should I sell? Listen, we're not paid for by eBay. We're not sponsored by eBay. Maybe one day, but till that time, we still do believe that eBay is the best platform to sell secondary goods. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
Be relevant.
and be reselling.
Peace.